world where achievements and accolades motivate us to do more and be more, we're often left wondering, is this really it?
Deep inside, you know there is more to life. You're ready to leave behind the old, push your way through, and claim the deeper life that's calling you.
That's where we excel.
We're your hosts, Stephanie Allen
and Maren Oslak.
And this is the Soulful Leader Podcast.
Sit back and relax as we share the shortcuts we've uncovered to help you make shift happen. Welcome back to the Soulful Leader Podcast. So we got a great response from last week's podcast, and there were a lot of questions. And if you haven't listened to last week's podcast, you're welcome to. And we were discussing empowering questions and what they are and the relationship between those and plants and improv and all kinds of stuff. So it was a fun podcast. Go ahead, go back and listen to it. And one of the things that Stephanie and I wanted to do today is answer some of the questions that came in and help us all to understand empowering questions and the power of them in our lives a little bit better. So one of the main things that I think most people experience, I know I did, I know Stephanie did, and many of you have mentioned this, is, okay, I didn't even know where to start. Where the heck do I start? And oftentimes so the thing about an empowering question is that even if you don't know where to start, just asking the question of, help me find the empowering question. Stephanie, did you have some thoughts on that?
Well, when I think about myself with that, and this is what kind of relating to some of the people's questions, were being in the unknown, being in the uncertainty, like that is something in our culture today that we are not comfortable with. I'm not comfortable with. Like, I want to know what the next plan is, the next path, I just want to know.
Right.
And the empowering question is actually being willing to be in the uncertainty, is to allow yourself to be in that flow of that currency. It's like, there's a Hopi poem that says, we're in this time where we've been trying to hang on to the shore, and hanging on tightly to the shore as the current is moving is actually going to cause a lot of pain. What we need to do is push off, come into the middle of that river so that we can be in that currency and totally surrender. And that is scary for most of us, and me included. And so the empowering questions allows you to be in that currency that is going to take you to an empowerment place. Like we talked about the improv, it's like the currency that's going to lift you up and take you to a better place than where you are right now.
So as I'm listening to you, I think, some of our listeners might think it's like, okay, well, I just let go of everything. And that's not necessarily the case. I still know where I'm going, in that I have the end goal. The end goal being, please help me find empowering questions. The end goal being, I want to understand what an empowering question is and how to use it in my life. And then letting go of needing to have the answer, A, look a certain way, and B, right now.
Yes, because really, like when we try to figure something out, we're actually coming from our past. And we've already been there. We already know how that turns out, which is why many of us default back to that way, because it's familiar, but it's not really essentially helpful. And in order to step into the unknown, it allows us to be open to that currency of our future. So there's that whole belief system that it's like, if you keep creating your past, you keep taking your past and throwing it in front of you, you're going to keep reliving the same old. You're not going to evolve. Well, you will evolve, but it's going to be through pain and suffering. And there's another way to evolve that is more uplifting and joyful and loving and kind, not only for yourself, but it creates that overflow, that creates that overabundance for others that you are in relationship with and that you're serving.
So I think a lot of our listeners may not understand what that means, taking your past and putting it in front of you. You want to talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. It's like, we get conditioned by the same old, same old. It's like the more you practice something, the more it becomes a permanent way of doing something. And by the time we're a small little child, we have been reinforced on what we should and shouldn't do for so much. And we end up living our lives of shoulds. I shoulda, coulda, woulda, ought to is what I often will say. And to break that pattern, we have to look at our ideal. Like, and we have done an actual podcast on that, on our future self, and that's a great one to listen to too. It's like looking at what would be the highest possibility for you, for your life, for who you're meant to become and what you're meant to serve. What is your heart calling you? And because it's in the future, you haven't been there yet, so guess what, you're not going to know what that is. But allowing yourself to be present to that question, like, what is it that I'm meant to become? Who am I? Who am I meant to be? Holding that is an actual question, and then allowing it to be empowering, meaning it's like saying, wow, look at all the most amazing things in my life that are helping me become my best self. So show me all those things. Yeah.
Yeah. So here's what I love about this is life didn't come with a manual, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately. So our job is to lean into it and kind of create our own manuals. And we were trained to be a certain way by our parents, by our society, by all of the things, right? And it's not been working all that well. It works to an extent, and there are definitely things that we would like to have better. The path to learning anything new is practicing. And so if I want to get to be the person who lives into the future and has this amazing life and wants that, how do I practice doing that? And what we talked about last week and what we're started today with is exactly that. It's a practice for learning to ask a question and sit in the quest. So when you look at the word question, you've got quest, eye on. So you can also say it's a quest I'm on, right? So that's what a question does. And unfortunately, we were trained to stop asking questions, stop asking so many questions when we were little. And Stephanie and I are going to encourage you to start asking more questions and really do it from that empowering place. And don't be so quick to need an answer. Start sitting in that.
And to presence that 3-year-old in yourself, because that really is the part, that childlike wonder. Like, a child isn't asking a question in order to blame or shame someone or themselves. They're asking a question because they want to come closer. They want to like see it, taste it, touch it, smell it. They want to use all their sensory. They want to understand it. And there's that
They're so excited.
They're so excited. And there's that saying, it's like, to know me is to love me. It's like a child is pure love. They really are. We actually are born through love, and we are total love. And then we learn how to be afraid. We learn how to not trust. Those are actually learned behaviors. But the truth is of who we are. So you can even say, okay, if my 3-year-old showed up right now in my life, what question would he or she ask? Yeah. And allow to be present to that. Like, take your little self, your younger version of yourself that hasn't been wounded, that hasn't been burdened by life yet, that is so in awe and wonder of the beauty that is present, and let them ask that question.
What's interesting is I wonder how many millions of dollars our listeners have spent on sales training. And the reason I bring that up right now is because learning to ask a good question, an empowering question, and listen and be present, not needing to know the answer, but truly listening to the answer, that's all sales is. That's when you have a really great salesperson and all the sales training, that's what it comes down to, is fall in love with your customer, get to know them. And that all happens because when we do fall in love with something, we want to know more about it. And we become that childlike, I'm excited, I'm enthusiastic, I want to know more about you. And the person we're talking to, if I do that with somebody and it's really coming from an authentic place of like, I really want to know more about you, that person's like, you got me here. Sure, let's be in a relationship. Let's be in, and now it's easy for quote unquote sales. And that's not the intention behind this. And maybe it is, we all are in business as well. We're leaders. It's just that remembering the piece of falling in love. When I'm on a quest, whether it's for myself or for my business, finding the questions to ask, that's a quest in and of itself, and it's a training. And that goes back to what I was saying before, is this is a great, just starting to practice doing it. You're not going to do it right overnight. You didn't learn to drive overnight. This is a learning process. Yeah.
And, something that reminds me too is that as a therapist, when I'm asking questions to a client, I'm not asking a question for their brain. I'm actually asking a question to their soul. And we are the soulful leader, right? And there is no question that you can ask without the answer already being solved within you. So as we learn to ask better and more empowering and more beautiful questions, our life becomes more empowering and beautiful too, because our life is the answer to that question.
Yeah. And we sit with it. And that's the thing that I really would like for everyone to get. And Stephanie, you mentioned it already, is being okay with not knowing and just being able to sit with it. That's such an uncomfortable place until you've done it for a while. And then it becomes more and more comfortable. And then you're like, wow, there's so much space here. And you can't find an answer without the space for it to be there. Like it needs space to show up. It's like if I was going back to our garden analogy that we were talking about last week, if I want to plant a tomato plant, the first thing I need to do is weed the garden and make space for it. So if you have a vision and a goal and something that you want to move forward to, you need to weed out the old stuff and make space for it. And one of the ways to do that is to ask the empowering question and then sit in that unknown, the unknowing. You don't know. Allow there to be space for okay, I don't know now. My future is what's giving it to me. If it was in my past, I would already have the answer. And that's what we started with, of like putting your past in front of you. Those are the old ways of doing things, and doing that again and again. Who is it? Einstein that said doing something over and over, doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result is the definition of insanity. That's what we do every day, is we take what we thought we knew in our past and we put it in front of us. And this is an invitation for you to open yourself to the unknown future that's calling you.
So I invite you to be on the quest of your soul and play with that and let yourself be a child again and ask the questions and be okay with not having the answer.
That's so powerful. I love it. Excellent. Well, I hope you all enjoy your journey this week, and we will look forward to chatting more with you next week on the Soulful Leader podcast. If you're enjoying the podcast, please do take a moment on iTunes or Spotify or your favorite podcast channel, or here on YouTube, and rate us and give us a rating, give us some feedback. Join us on our Facebook page, the Soulful Leader podcast, or visit our website.
And thank you so much for sharing your time with us and sharing it with others too. So till next time. And that wraps up another episode of the Soulful Leader podcast with your hosts, Stephanie Allen
and Maren Oslack. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to dive deeper, head over to our website at thesoulfulleaderpodcast.com.
Until next time.